We're here in Blackfoot, Idaho at a city park right by the airport. Interstate's in the background, but this has been a great place for us to stay. We've been here for a week. We're going to be leaving tomorrow, but we've really enjoyed it here. It's $20 a night for electric and water. Doesn't have sewer, but we've been doing great. Our water tank was a little over 2/3. This is Saturday. We leave Sunday. We haven't even run out yet, so we still have. I've been taking a shower every day. Granted, it's been a Navy shower, a couple minutes each, and then Heather took a shower, much shorter than her normal shower, but we've been using water like normal otherwise, and with our onboard tank, we've had no problem. We never hooked up to the city water here. Since we don't have sewer connections here, we wanted to track our water usage pretty closely, and our onboard freshwater tank has been working great, so we can go at least a week, probably longer on our water tank, no problem. So I want to take some time to talk about the things that don't always go right in RVs. Obviously most of the videos that you see from RVers are sunshine and rainbows and everything's going good. But to own an RV, you've got to be able to fix stuff. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and the issues that we've had with our 2021 Voltage Triton 4271 by Dutchmen. And Dutchman's owned by Keystone. But brands don't matter a whole lot in the RV world. They're all pretty much made the same. There are some differences. You want to look at reviews, you want to look at performance, statistics, obviously, and you want to look at the features that come with it. But they all, right now in particular, are being built so fast. I mean, they're trying to slap these things together and get them out the doors because the demand is unprecedented. I mean, it's never before in history. I mean, by a factor of 2 or 3 or 4. They build them quickly. They do a PDI at the dealer, of course, pre-delivery inspection where they go through and test things, check off boxes, make sure things work. Almost always they're going to miss things or not test things quite as thoroughly or test every detail that they should have. The manufacturer does the same thing before they release it to the dealer. They go through and go through a checklist, before it's released. And there are some things that they missed on ours. And if you buy a new one, they're going to miss them on yours. That's why personally I prefer, if the option exists, to get a used RV. That was actually our preference, but there wasn't anything with a floor plan that we wanted. That was only in the new model that had what we wanted. So we ended up getting a 2021, but I would have preferred used, because used, somebody else has gone through it and discovered the bugs and dealt with those bugs. And so if you buy new, that person's going to be you. I brought a lot of tools from home to work on the RV. Everything from hardware to plumbing to electrical. Be prepared to work on things. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I had to fix on this RV. One of them was it took a few weeks to figure this out. So when we originally got it, we filled the water tank about 1/3 full when we were at the dealer, just so we'd have water in the fresh tank while we were traveling, in case we need to stop and use the restroom or whatever. But we actually used their hookups there, so we didn't draw from that fresh tank while we were there at the dealer. Probably should have in terms of testing, but it wouldn't have probably mattered until we ran out. So tank filled okay at that point. So this is a gravity freshwater fill on this unit. And so you basically have to put a hose in and let the gravity go through the hose, and then there's a vent line that comes from the freshwater tank to vent out the air as the water's going in and filling it. The way I discovered this is I went to fill this when we were in South Dakota, because we were going to go to a campground that did not have water. So it's we had electric, but we were going to need to take our own water, which is fine. We've got a 160-gallon tank. We can go for, we just discovered we can go a week at least without running out of water, probably longer if we were more conservative with it. So I went to fill the water and it wouldn't fill at all. I mean, water was shooting back out, coming right out of the fill line. And that's not atypical on a gravity fill system. Sometimes a little bit of pressure can help, but you got to be careful because it is a gravity fill line. So I tried pressurizing it. I tried sealing that hole and then putting pressure in that line to force the water in and then force the air out. You have to be careful doing that because you can damage things, so you need to recognize the limits of that pressure, and don't do it for a long period of time. So I did it for about a minute just to pressurize it and see if I could get water in that tank. And after that, the hose and everything was so pressurized that when I took it out, the water shot about 10 feet out. It got me and got everything behind me, so it shot out of that gravity fill line with force. So it wasn't going in. Obviously that was the force was created by the pressure against probably the fill line mostly. And the fill line is draped down in the RV. I'll show you a picture of it. But it's not clamped up to where it should be to have a proper grade of a gravity fill line. So it's looped and drooped way lower than the input of the fresh water tank. So that's not great in and of itself. That wasn't the main issue. So let me tell you how I did finally get it filled that time before I realized what was going on. So I took, somebody on Facebook actually recommended this on one of the RV groups, which are great resources, by the way. YouTube, Facebook. If you've got an RV, you need to be in some groups where you can ask some questions, and a lot of this has been there, done that. Okay, here's how I dealt with this particular issue, and utilizing that experience from other RVers. And of course, we've been RVing for 7 years, so it's not like this is new. But problems you run into are always new. You never know what you're going to run into. So what I ended up doing was following the advice of someone and cutting off the male end of a 25-foot water hose, and I basically shoved that down the gravity fill line all the way in to the fresh water tank. I just shoved that sucker in there, and I got all 25 feet in, which means because that line's probably only 15, maybe 20, it's probably 15 feet long. So I had about 10 feet of hose coiled up, I'm sure, in that fresh water tank, which is fine. It's not going to hurt anything. So that means at the end of the gravity fill line, we have a hose that is sticking out that you can attach. You can attach another hose to and pressure fill the system, and so it's filling directly in the fresh water tank. So let me back up here. I tested the vent line as well. When we were having this issue, I took that vent line off. I followed the vent line. Well, I looked under the bay to see the vent line and make sure it wasn't kinked. I took the vent line off where it comes out. I blew through it, and I actually sucked out of it to make sure that there wasn't a check valve, make sure it wasn't kinked, make sure it was open, so that and the air was flowing. So there's no reason why it shouldn't have been filling, other than I was thinking maybe the drooping in the line, even though the fill is still slightly higher, still probably a foot higher than the input of the fresh water tank. So that should have been overcoming that water in the line, but it wasn't. So basically, by forcing that water in with the fresh water line, or with the hose, it filled, and it filled successfully. And so it turns out where the air was going was not actually coming out the vent line. I found out later. So the air was going out around the hose, so that provided the vent, the place for the air to go around the hose that was in the water fill line. So anyway, I got that all filled in, got the tank full, and we went on our merry way. And then later, a couple weeks later, when I went to flush the black tank, the front black tank, I hadn't flushed it before in this RV, which means hooking up fresh water to an input that goes into the black tank in a sprayer that leads out the inside of the black tank. I had the black tank open, into a hose, of course, with a clear elbow, so I could see what was coming out, and nothing was coming out. There was no water going in that black tank. So where's it going? Well, ultimately, I noticed the water started coming out of the freshwater fill line, and I'm like, how the heck is water that I'm putting in to the black water flush coming out the freshwater fill? That makes no sense. Those two systems should not be touching each other at all. So I dug further, and I got a flashlight and was sticking my head in the tiny holes that were where they routed the tubing, and discovered that during manufacturing, the hose for the freshwater vent and the black water flush are the same design, same color, and they swapped them. And they didn't realize it, I'm sure. And apparently nobody tested it. And during the PDI, nobody did black tank flush. So it turns out the freshwater vent line was actually going to the black tank flush fill. So when you went to flush the black tank, it was going in the freshwater tank. So we were venting the black tank out where the freshwater should have been vented, and I had to swap those. So I ran to Home Depot and got the right connectors, and cut those lines and reversed them, spliced them together the way they should be, and all's been working fine after that. The black water flush worked great after that, no problem. And I left the hose in. I haven't even taken that out for the freshwater fill, because I figured that's more efficient to pressure fill it anyway rather than gravity fill. I'm just going to leave that hose in there. But now it should have no problem with venting, because it can vent out the proper vent line as well as around the hose, so it's got plenty of room there. So that's something that nobody caught. The manufacturer didn't catch, the dealer didn't catch. I reached out to both of them just to let them know, and they're like, "Oh, sorry about that." So you got to do your own checking and be prepared to fix things like that. So that was the biggest issue that we ran into. Since this is a toy hauler, we have a fuel station, 30-gallon fuel station back there with a pump, so we can pump into a vehicle or can or whatever. It's designed for ATVs or side-by-sides or what have you. The gauge on that is not working. I haven't fixed that yet. That hasn't been high on my priority list. We haven't used it, that tank much, and I've got an idea how much fuel is in there anyway. You have trim come down. I mean, that's pretty typical in almost any RV. When you drive it down the road, they say that's equivalent to a 3 or 4 on the Richter scale in terms of earthquake. So you're driving your vehicle down the road in a constant earthquake. So people sometimes rag on RVs, hey, they fall apart. Well, so would your house. Most homes would come apart at the seams if you drove it down the road at 60, 70 miles an hour. In a 3 and 4 on the Richter scale. They can't handle that. So, the RVs are built intentionally to be lightweight. There's a lot crammed into these things, and so they try to stay. The trim is lightweight. They use a lot of nails, and they use some glues, and they use staples, and those tend to come out when you're driving down the road. So be prepared for trim to come down. Not a big deal. I mean, most of them I fixed with screws. I just shot screws into them to hold them, properly. They're not going anywhere. But most things are fine. We had 2 pieces of trim. We had one on the ceiling come down a bit, and then one over by our refrigerator come off at the top and at the bottom, and not a big deal to fix those. So repaired those. You're also going to have plumbing issues. You don't want to drive it with the system pressurized typically. As you're driving down the road, if something comes loose, you don't want water shooting everywhere. So when we got to where we're going, of course, we'd pressurize the system, and we had a few little leaks. Those are to be expected, mostly under your sinks. They're the little hand tighten things, and they just weren't super tight, or they backed off during driving. Very easy, just tighten those things up, but definitely inspect for leaks, especially if you have a new RV, because you're going to have them, and be prepared to fix them. Most of the time it's just snugging up some connections, not a big deal. We did have an issue where every time we'd take a shower, we had water in the underbay, so obviously we had a leak there, and I was trying to track that down. It wasn't on the fill side, it was just when we took a shower and it drained, so it was on the drain side. So I eventually figured out, I took the drain off inside the shower and looked down in there and discovered that the little plastic crown that goes into the drain pipe from the shower itself had a crack in it. It had cracked probably during driving. It's possible it happened during construction, but that was a crack. I was able to seal it with silicone. No big deal. That's fixed. No more water leaking. It was just leaking down in the floor and underneath. But you do want to nip those water leaks in the bud, because they can do an immense amount of damage to an RV. These between some of its particle board and OSB wood, if that gets wet, they swell. Not good. So don't let water leaks of any kind go without attention. What else? We had a vent on top of the roof that wasn't totally closing, and that was just simply the little metal clip was new from the factory, and it wasn't springy enough. So I had to go up there and just kind of stretch it out a little bit, and then that vent would close down into that clip that was designed to hold it, and that worked fine after that. So, and not a big deal. Again, these are the kind of things you should expect to find in an RV. So one issue that particularly annoyed me was the garage air conditioner. To give you a little bit of backstory, this RV was delayed for a couple of weeks waiting on that third air conditioner for the garage back there. So it's got 3 AC units, and there was a delay, so I'm sure they were waiting on it, and we were chomping at the bit. So once they finally got it in, they sent somebody out and slapped that thing in, and they slapped it in. That's all they did. They did not install it properly at all. So that was definitely something that I had to address. The garage air conditioner would cool. It was putting out great cool air. It was brand new, but it would only last for like 30 seconds to a minute and then shut off. You know, and so it was shutting off very quickly after it would kick on, and it wasn't running consistently. So I had to, you know, I took the vent down, the cover down, to try to figure out what was going on in there. Well, the thermostat that tells the AC, you know, when to kick on and when to kick off was in the cold air dump side. If you're familiar with RV air conditioners, there's a separator in the middle, and you have a return air side, and then you have a cold air dump side. Well, when you have the thermostat on the cold air dump side, it's going to get cold very fast. As soon as it kicks on, it's going to say, hey, this room's great, and it's going to shut off the air conditioner, and that's exactly what it was doing. So I had to reroute the thermostat onto the correct side, so it was picking up the return side and not the cold air side. The separator also was not installed well at all. There were giant gaps between the cold air side and the return side. So I sealed that up really good with, you know, HVAC tape. There were also gaps on the edge where between the ceiling and the roof was open into the cavity where the return air side was. So, you know, you're sucking in air from the roof, which is very hot. You don't want to do that. You just want to cool the air that in the room it's supposed to be cooling. So I sealed that up, and since then it's been working great, no problem. But that thing was just slapped in there, and it was not installed properly. So you got to be prepared to fix that stuff. I also inspected the other two air conditioners just to triple check. They were good. They were installed properly. They had a proper separator. Everything was working great on those. So it was just that garage, that third air conditioner, which is an option on this unit. So, you know, they threw it in after the fact, and whoever put it in was probably doing it. It was probably out of the factory, and they were in the blazing sun, and just threw it on there and didn't install it properly. But again, I'm not knocking Dutchmen. I had some emails with the general manager of Dutchmen. He seems great. You know, good correspondence. You know, it's just the nature of the beast with RVs. I mean, you're going to have some of this stuff. I'm not making excuses for it. You shouldn't have to deal with these things. Quality control needs to be tighter. The inspections need to be better. That the factory does in particular. You know, and then the dealer should be double checking that. It shouldn't have to get to the end user who's got to fix all this stuff. Now, some of this stuff happens obviously after delivery, and it's as a result of driving it down the road in a 3 or 4 earthquake. Yeah, I get that. That's probably the case with the shower leak. But some of these other things are obviously manufacturing issues that should have been corrected. So anyway, I just wanted to give you the other side. Not everything is sunshine and lollipops in these RVs, and it's just nature of the beast. So be prepared to deal with that. One other thing I noticed was construction materials that were left in the underbay. So there's the underbelly that's sealed with coroplast. It's screwed and attached. So I unscrewed it in some places to get access to see where the fresh tank line was and the freshwater vent line was. And under there were screws, sawdust, and pieces of wood and PVC pipe from plumbing. You name it. They were just kind of probably fell down to the bottom, and that's where they stayed. They were never cleaned out or emptied. So another thing, attention to detail when they go through and make sure you're not dragging around a bunch of extra construction materials with you, because that doesn't exactly help. Not that your gas mileage is stellar, but you don't want to drag around weight that you don't otherwise need.